The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
The city's financial crisis is about to explode. Chicago needs to come up with more than $1 billion and fast, but it doesn't have the money. So should we start talking about the B word? What would bankruptcy mean? Or are there better ways to fix the city's massive money meltdown? We'll tackle these questions and more tonight on this special edition of In the Loop. Good evening. I'm Chris Bury. Welcome to this special edition of In the Loop, a look at Chicago's financial mess. Could Chicago become the next Detroit? Some people in high places, including the governor, are suggesting bankruptcy is a way out of Chicago's deepening crisis. Two giant pension payments totaling more than $1 billion are coming due this summer for city workers and school teachers. The city's credit rating has been downgraded to junk bond status. But what does it all mean for the average taxpayer? And what sort of options does the city have left? Every morning, 42-year-old Drew Fox leaves his home in Chicago's Bronzeville neighborhood and drives to work in Gary, Indiana. He co-owns a business called the 18th Street Brewery. So why open a business in the Hoosier State and not in Chicago?
Chicago permits are extremely expensive, into maybe 500s into the thousands. Here it was really simple. It was, a matter of, 50 or 75 bucks to pull a building permit. Holy cow.
Fox's business, founded 5 years ago in Chicago, now brews 7 varieties of craft beer, supplying nearly 2,500 barrels to bars and restaurants in the Midwest each year. He said moving the business to Indiana was a no-brainer.
To open a brewery our scale, you're probably looking right around, fully built out, right around $300,000 in change. And we spent a little bit over $100,000 in change to open this brewery.
Indiana officials report at least 31 Illinois-based employers, most of them manufacturers, have recently moved thousands of jobs to the Hoosier State. And while Illinois is losing manufacturing jobs, Chicago has seen a jump in the number of high-tech and service jobs. But they don't generate nearly the tax revenue that manufacturers do. Don Spagnolo is an attorney and accountant in Hoffman Estates. His firm has seen many clients pack up and leave Illinois.
When I first started practicing 27 years ago, probably 50% of my clients were manufacturing companies. I can count on one hand right now the number of companies I have in the state of Illinois that are manufacturing companies.
Since 2000, Illinois has lost about 300,000 manufacturing jobs. And over the past decade, more than 600,000 people have moved out of the state. It all adds up to a loss of around $26 billion in potentially taxable revenue for the state, a major factor in the state's money mess.
We are in a long, slow decline, and we'll never fund our pensions or fund our schools unless we're growing.
Governor Rauner and the state legislature are wrestling with massive debt, much of it the result of more than $100 billion in unfunded pensions for retired workers. And the city of Chicago is facing its own pension crisis.
Chicago is in a much more precarious place than Illinois is with respect to its pensions.
Rachel Cortez led the team at Moody's Investor Service, which downgraded the credit rating of both the city and Chicago Public Schools to junk bond status. The reason? Their enormous combined pension liabilities, $30 billion. Simply put, the city does not have enough money to fulfill its promises to union retirees.
Chicago's pension plans, the 4 pension plans, municipal, labor, police, and fire, under various projections and various assumptions, they are projected to reach insolvency within the next decade.
No other city in the country owes more money to retired workers. Here's how it breaks down for every man, woman, and child in the city. In Chicago, the pension liability per capita is $26,000. It's $18,000 in New York, $11,000 in Philadelphia, and $13,000 in Detroit before that city became the biggest in America to declare bankruptcy. So how did we get here? People are living longer, putting more of a strain on pensions. Downturns in the economy led to less tax money collected, and during the Daley years, money intended for public pensions was instead taken to balance the budget, so voters would not face the pain of higher property taxes. So just what does junk bond status mean for Chicago? First, let's take a look at what a municipal bond is and how it works.
It's like any other bond. It's a type of a loan issued by the city.
Ann Logue is a lecturer in the finance department at UIC. She says if the city needs $20 million for, let's say, a road project, it will borrow money from investors by issuing municipal bonds. It's similar to a person using a credit card.
And so governments are constantly borrowing money, too, just as a way to match their expenses with their tax revenues.
Municipal bonds are traditionally a safe investment, and the interest earned is tax-free. Cities with pristine credit are currently paying people who invest in municipal bonds just under 3%. But with Moody's downgrading the city's credit rating to junk bond status, Chicago is now forced to pay investors nearly double what many other cities pay. That means millions of dollars in added expenses for the city each year. So how does Chicago get itself out of this mess?
You can either raise taxes, you can borrow more money, or you can cut services.
That seems to be the standard advice. But others think more drastic steps are necessary. Attorney Spagnuolo believes bankruptcy needs to be part of the discussion.
What bankruptcy does for you is it gives you somewhat of a stick to deal with the creditors that are picking the carcass apart, so to speak.
In Detroit, bankruptcy let the city cut new deals with unions and other creditors to get out from crushing debt. Now, Illinois' new governor has said Chicago is sliding into bankruptcy, and he supports legislation that would give struggling cities the option to file for bankruptcy, something Mayor Emanuel strongly opposes.
Going to bankruptcy court doesn't relieve the state of its responsibility to take on what I think is a dual taxation.
Meanwhile, in Indiana, they're hiring and expanding at the 18th Street Brewery.
Looking back on it, the decision we made was tough, was hard, but it was a right decision in order for us to be successful.
Now joining us to tackle that subject are Terry Savage, syndicated financial columnist, Ed Bachrock, chairman for the Citizens for Pension Integrity, and public finance banker Adrian Archia. And joining us later in the show will be Ron Sandak, a state representative who believes bankruptcy is a viable option. Hello and welcome, everyone. So we have a couple of big looming problems that I want to take on one at a time. The first order of business is the city owes the police and fire pensions about $538 million. Mayor Emanuel in this latest deal wants to make a smaller down payment and stretch this out over 40 years instead of 25 years. The legislature so far has said okay, the governor has not. Terry, is this just another way of kicking that can down the road?
Yes, and everybody's trying to kick the can. This is as if you went to your credit card and there's some companies that try and negotiate for you. Well, could I make a smaller minimum monthly payment? In the end, that's going to pile up. This is not a surprise that we're in this crisis. This was foreseeable years ago. In fact, 7 years ago, I wrote a series called The Coming Pension Wars, and people were really annoyed. Don't talk like that. Nobody wanted to think about it, but it's as if you've been rolling your own credit cards or getting a new credit card, borrowing from a different company and transferring your balance. We can't print money as individuals. The state can't print the money. The city can't. Only the federal government's getting away with it because they can print. So now we're at that moment, the moment of truth. Pay up or default or stretch it out if you can, but we're really near the end of that rubber band.
During the campaign, Mayor Emanuel campaigned on the promise of reform before revenue. In this deal, according to the Tribune, their analysis of it says that there are no cuts here for the retirees. There is no reform of the pension system. Did the mayor cave on this?
So the mayor ran before the Supreme Court ruled.
And the Supreme Court ruling, just to clarify for the audience, basically said that the retiree benefits are a contract and that they cannot be diminished
Or impaired, that's correct. So you had the mayor campaigning, not knowing how the Supreme Court would rule, but even then, the reform he had already enacted for the municipal workers and for the laborers was a 40-year stretch out. Now he's got a stretch out for the policemen and firemen. He's wanting to smooth that out again. So the same is going to happen with the teachers. I'm sure we're going to see something there. So it's really a matter that he's trying to get it off of his desk. You know, if you look at this, the way you can look at the pension problem in two different ways. You can look at it from his point of view, and you can look at it from the taxpayer's point of view. From his point of view, it's like a doctor in a hospital, and he's got patients in 5 different rooms.
And that's a trauma.
And they're in trauma, and he's going from room to room, and he's just trying to keep them alive until his shift ends. From a taxpayer's standpoint, they're riding into a valley, and suddenly people are starting to shoot at them from all over. And they just want to get all the targets in one place so that they can have a battle with one person. So it's looking at it in completely different ways.
Adrian, from the taxpayer point of view, are taxpayers inevitably going to face either higher taxes or fewer services here?
I guess. I think both. The reality of it is we have a major financial hole we've got to fill, and something's got to give. I do think, though, that what this situation has created is a moment of truth, okay? Now people realize the rubber's hit the road. How high is the property tax increase going to be? How many increases will there be over what period of time? I think you're probably, people need to acknowledge there's probably less resistance to a property tax increase on the part of City Council than people believe, because they know now's the time. They cannot get out of this situation without raising taxes. Also, services need to be cut. The reality of it is, where are those services going to be cut? There probably is room in a number of different places, but maybe we won't have the level of service we're used to, but that's what it's going to take to get us to the next level.
Not only do we have this city payment coming due,
Chicago Public Schools.
The school board has got a $600 million plus payment due immediately. What if it doesn't pay, Terry? What are the consequences?
Well, this is the moment. So you say, well, I can't pay my credit card. I'll just shove it in the drawer. A lot will happen. First of all, the teachers union will be very upset. You know, I come from the Chicago Public Schools, and I have, believe it or not, now grandchildren who will be attending in the fall. This is the heart of what a city values, is its education system. This is what keeps property values up so you can tax them. This is what keeps jobs here. And if we have, which looks like is impending, a public crisis where the teachers are so upset that either A, their pension contribution is not made, or B, they make the contribution but close some more schools or don't pay the custodians or whatever, or the teachers, that's a real public crisis. So that's why the time frame is not down the road. June 30th is the deadline. Oh yeah, the state has property tax revenues coming in August, so maybe we can kite the check for 60 days. But the truth is we really have to deal with a final solution and face up to revenues, services, what?
And Ed, they're talking about a number of different things, maybe taking some money from tax incremental financing or creating a separate taxing authority for education. What do you see about this immediate crisis? How to fix that?
Well, I do.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I'm sure that they'll find ways to either pass legislation or scrape up some money from some fund to get past the immediate crisis. But it won't solve the problem. And what we have tried to do, our group, is look at it as a comprehensive solution. Let's face the facts and say it's going to take sacrifice from everybody, a lot of sacrifice, unimaginable pain. But let's do it. Let's do it one time. Get it over with. The other big problem that people don't realize is that when you have a lingering problem like this that goes on decade after decade, you are weakening your civic trust, and you're not resilient. If there's a shock to the system, whether it be an economic downturn, a terrorist attack, or something else that we can't imagine, if we've got all these other problems, you're going to see collapse.
Adrian, you were talking about possibly higher taxes and service cuts. There have been some specifics floated. Alderman this week went back to the idea of a city income tax, 1%, which Mayor Emanuel has rejected before. Is it different this time? Do you see an opening for a city income tax?
Well, I don't know if a city income tax is the answer. Maybe some other type of tax, some value-added tax, some additional taxes on services, widening the sales tax base, if you will, increasing the number of things to which the sales tax rate is applied. I do think, though, that the key message here is shared sacrifice. I think people need to know that everyone's going to be paying a price here in order to get us to the next level. We've got some structural issues with both our Chicago Public Schools, State of Illinois, and City of Chicago budgets. The money's in the budget for the CPS pension payment. It's there in the budget. The money's there. Now, what happens down the road when the budget shortfall becomes apparent and the bills need to be paid?
Terry wanted to jump in here.
Yeah, I just want to say one point that we really should make, that we are all, and it's probably true, Adrian, I'm quite sure you're right, that there'll be sacrifice and there'll be higher taxes. But if you take a look at the big picture, that is not the recipe for making the city or the state or the school system stronger in the long run. Higher taxes, no matter where they fall, influence behavior. So you put an income tax on, people move to the suburbs. You put a driving into the city tax on cars, and corporate headquarters move out to the suburbs. And some even move out of state. What we really need here is economic growth, and I think the mayor understands that.
Yes, I think
it's just
you're right.
We've cut it so close now that we don't have the room, and that's the sad part of this all. It doesn't mean that we won't have some cutbacks. We will.
One of the mayor's proposals, of course, to help solve this crisis is a city-owned casino. And under his plan, for 7 years, the revenue generated from that casino would go to pay down the pensions. Ed, what's your thought on that?
Well, we've studied this. The average revenue that accrues to any governmental unit, whether it be state or local, the other casinos in the state is $57 million a year.
Which is peanuts, right?
That's peanuts. So let's say you give it twice that, say 4 times that. You can get, maybe they get 100 million, maybe they get 200 million. Keep in mind that everybody that comes from out of Chicago to go to that casino has to drive by a major casino on the way. But given the fact that you can create a lot of revenue from that, we've calculated with the current level of benefits that are guaranteed by the Supreme Court ruling, if you were going to try to finance that with pension bonds, which we illustrate in our website, it would require $2.6 billion a year for the next 40 years. So 200 million is shooting an elephant with a BB gun.
So, Ed, where does the revenue come from?
Well,
let me just follow up on that. Where does the revenue come from?
Well, as Adrian said, if there's shared sacrifice, then perhaps you can craft something so that there's a painful increase in taxes, let's say $1 billion, which is unimaginable if you could reduce the benefits. But unless you talk about the B word, you can't reduce those benefits. So you're going to have to come up with $2.6 billion. And keep in mind that currently the 5 big plans, and we look at them as one monolith. We don't have the patients in separate rooms. So those 5 plans are paying out $3.2 billion worth of benefits every year. And there's no new money coming into the system right now. In 15 years, at their current rate of growth at 6% a year, it'll be $7.2 billion a year. So you're talking about huge amounts. So something's got to give here.
And Adrian, you wanted to jump in.
Well, I do think, though, when it comes to the casino issue, I think there are a lot more issues with respect to that pool of revenue that need to be looked at, and a lot more issues around the casino in Chicago that need to be thought about. The fact of the matter is Chicago's a world-class city, bond rating or not. And I think in order to offer the amenities that a world-class city should have, a casino is a natural addition, I think, to the environment. I think there are a lot of people in the tourism industry that would agree with that, whether you like gambling or not.
But would you agree that it's not nearly enough to solve
It's not enough to solve the entire problem, but it is not minimal amounts of money. It is $200 million. It's not chump change. That goes a long way to fill the kind of hole you need to make either an annual pension fund bond payment, to be able to pay off a pension fund payment over a period of time. We're not talking nickels and dimes here. $200 million is not a small sum of money in a budget the size of the city's budget.
Terry, after the election, Illinois rolled back the income tax top rate from 5% to 3.75%. Do you think it's inevitable that that's going to go back up?
Yeah, sadly, I think it is inevitable that that the state income tax will go up, and I think Governor Rauner has kind of indicated he might be amenable to that, as long as some very big structural things that make Illinois business non-competitive, things that as ordinary citizens we don't see, but business owners see, that the fellow who owned the brewery referred to. Those kinds of changes could make Illinois a better place for businesses to move in and create growth. You cannot tax the growth of money that you don't have. So you can raise the rates until the last person, please turn out the lights. What we need to do at the same time as we acknowledge we've got a problem here is create a business environment. And I'm just not speaking Governor Rauner's position. This is just a basic economic position. We want to attract business, employers, and jobs to Illinois, so we have the revenue to tax. This issue of the Supreme Court ruling that I acknowledge Ed's group. I've worked with Ed's group, the Citizens for Pension Integrity, acknowledges that this was not the fault of any teacher or police or fireman that this didn't get done. This was politicians buying votes with promises that didn't have to be paid for, it seemed like, a long way down the road. Well, the moment is here. But without some kind of adjustment, the numbers simply don't work.
On that note, we have to take a short pause. Governor Rauner has been a vocal proponent of cities and school boards getting the authority to file for bankruptcy.
Chicago is sliding into bankruptcy. They can't pay their pensions. They can't pay their bills. Their debt's been going up for years.
Joining us on the panel now is Ron Sandak, state representative for the 81st District, and welcome.
Thank you.
So you believe that, to begin, the Chicago Public Schools should consider filing for bankruptcy. Why is that?
Well, I mean, by any definition of insolvency, those systems are insolvent. Of course, there is no ability right now to file for bankruptcy because the state of Illinois doesn't have an authorizing law.
And you have introduced that law.
I have.
That bill.
That bill is right now sitting in the Rules Committee of the House of Representatives because it hasn't been called for full introduction to the House. I'm hopeful someday it will get an airing and a vetting that it deserves.
The Chicago Teachers Union says that because of the Illinois Supreme Court decision, that those pension benefits cannot be lowered. Would bankruptcy change that?
It could. And look, there's 24 states right now that permit municipalities and other local units of government to authorize and file bankruptcy. What's important about Chapter 9 is, and it's been around since 1937, this is not new. What's important about Chapter 9 is it requires eligibility. Right now, a person can file Chapter 7, a company can file Chapter 11, and they're in the system. For a 9 to happen, a municipality has to show it's actually insolvent and actually bankrupt. So a federal judge, a bankruptcy judge, does this eligibility requirement. And then you have one convenient venue, one venue where creditors and other interested stakeholders and the municipality can gather towards a plan of adjustment.
And this is a federal judge.
It is. It is. And what's important here, Chris, is what we're talking about is what's in the best interest of taxpayers of that municipal government. Not what's in the best interest of creditors, not what's in the best interest of union members, not what's in the best interest of politicians, but taxpayers. And there is a body of law, mostly California cases, which show, some highly successful, some less successful, that a Chapter 9, one venue, where a plan of restructuring or adjustment can occur, can actually benefit taxpayers.
Of course, Mayor Emanuel is adamantly opposed to this, and even the credit rating agencies say that Chicago is not there yet, that there are still other options. What do you say to that?
Well, there might be, and that's fine. And look, I'm not advocating anyone do anything that isn't in their best interest. I'm providing a venue, an opportunity for local units of government that are truly insolvent and may need this apparatus to successfully restructure their financial future for their taxpayers. I'm not advocating for Chicago or the public school systems. I'm not advocating for anyone. In fact, there's a mayor in Rockford, Larry Morrissey, who's been very vocal about the need for bankruptcy. The first thing he'll tell you is Rockford's not there. We're going to try and do this our way.
He wants that option.
He wants the option.
So let's
he
bring
thinks it's an important option.
Let's bring in the rest of the panel. Adrian, the B word. Should we be talking about it?
Not right now. My view is it's just really not something we should be talking about with respect to any of our major issuers here that are facing these pension issues. I just don't think we're at that point.
There's a certain psychological stigma, Terry. No one wants the embarrassment of being called the next Detroit. Does that factor into this?
I don't think that's what it is. I think what bankruptcy is, if it is a possibility, is it gives a lot of leverage to all parties to encourage them to. This reminds me of the parent who says, I'm going to give you the count of 3 to stop doing that. 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4. The authority, the desire, the incentive for all parties to come together on this has been lacking. It's political. It's because of the Supreme Court decision. And so if you had that possibility of bankruptcy in the background, it might encourage people to say, can we really do this to our schools, to our city? No, let's get together and work it out.
Is that the stick that is needed here?
Well, the only way that you can have shared sacrifice is if you can reduce benefits and change the terms of the pension plan. And that can only be done under a federal bankruptcy court. Now, we've illustrated on our website how you can share the sacrifice, how it would actually work. But, and that could constitute what is a prepackaged bankruptcy that could be agreed to by the parties, and then you walk in and it's blessed by the judge. And it spends 5 minutes in a bankruptcy court.
But Representative, aren't there a lot of unknowns in bankruptcy? You really don't know what's going to happen with that judge.
You don't, but a Chapter 9 is fundamentally different than a 7 or 11. Let's make sure we're clear on what it is. There's no going out of business sale. There is no late night TV attorney saying, info tapes or whatever. There isn't throw the keys to the creditor and say it's your town now. What it is, by its very definition, is a restructuring and adjustment plan. So it requires some consensus. It requires some negotiation. And what's important here, again, I didn't invent this. This has been around since 1937. There are a number of examples of towns that have restructured for the better. And, since Detroit, that was 2013, there's not been one municipal bankruptcy since. So there is no fear of a run on the bankruptcy court. There is no fear that everyone's going to, take it in the shorts. This is a measured, structured, time-honored vessel for trying to restructure financial hardships.
We only have a few seconds left. What are the politics of this? You're a Republican governor, but Democratic supermajority. Do you have a snowball's chance in hell of getting this passed into law?
We do. Look, shared governance, divided government is off to a rocky start. The folks in charge of Springfield don't like sharing. Well, the people of the state of Illinois have determined they want some balance, they want some checks. So we're going to get through this rocky experiment, Chris. I believe this has got more than a snowball's chance because it's part and parcel of an overall reform concept.
And as we've said, this is a moment of real crisis here, and sometimes those moments are the impetus to get things done. Well, that wraps up this special edition on Chicago's financial mess. Terry Savage, Ed Bachrach, Adrian Archia, and State Representative Ron Sandak, thanks for joining us tonight. To hear more on the financial crisis, log on to our website, wycc.org, and look for In the Loop. Until next time, I'm Chris Bury.